Hello and welcome to this digital dialogue where we are exploring the topic of digital transformation and sustainability. What are the intersections? What are the synergies? And how can we intentionally design an organization or a business ecosystem to be more sustainable? I'm Wendy Keen, a fellow with the Institute for Digital Transformation, and it is an honor to host this session today on behalf of the Institute. We have an incredible panel lined up with a diverse set of people, different perspectives, different areas of expertise, different global contexts. So expect a very insightful conversation. So let's meet our panel. We will start with Selena, founder of ARA Risk Advisory, joining us from the States. Selena, great to see you, and please introduce yourself.
Great to see you too, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased to be here. My name is Selena Evans. I am an attorney and business architect, an organizational designer. I specialize in governance, AI governance in particular, and transformations for highly regulated markets.
Awesome. Welcome, Selena. And now let's also meet Oliver. Oliver is Technology Director at Scott Logic, joining us from the UK. Oliver, welcome, and please intro yourself.
Thank you, Wendy. It's great to be here. So yeah, Oliver Cronk, Technology Director at Scott Logic, who are a B Corp consultancy. My role covers research and development, but majors a lot on sustainability and AI.
Welcome, Oliver. And we are also going to have one more panelist joining us, Hans, who is also a fellow with the Institute and managing director of the Goodwin Company, and Hans will be joining us from Sweden. So welcome to you all, and really a big thank you for sharing your time and expertise with all of us. So let me give a little bit of a backdrop here, and then we'll jump into it and have a conversation here. So digital transformation, as we define it at the Institute, is it's about a metamorphic change for an organization. It's not about automating status quo. And in fact, we look at digital transformation as a set of beliefs and guiding principles for how we can drive and sustain a transformative organization supported by technology. And this is where I think the intersection with sustainability becomes really interesting, because sustainability as a way of thinking, as a way of designing an organization, is at the heart of how we sustain and how we transform. Sustainable thinking can allow us to, for example, uncover innovation opportunities. It's how we operate indefinitely and responsibly in a globally connected world. And just to level set on my terminology, when I use the word sustainability, I'm including all aspects: environmental, social, and economic considerations. So, Selena, Oliver, let's explore some of these intersections, possibilities, and practical recommendations. So maybe we start with a bit of a pulse from each of you. Oliver, maybe you start us off if you don't mind. And, what do you see in organizations? Digital transformation, sustainability, do you see these things synergizing? Do they, work in silos? Do you see organizations being proactive, reactive? Just what's your perspective there?
Yeah, I mean, in the conversations and the work that I'm having with clients, it's a mixture of all the things you've just described, really. But increasingly, there's a desire to not just do digital transformation, but to do that sustainably. Or where there is an organization that has a clear, commitment to circular economy, or to lowering its carbon footprint, that the technology function or the transformation teams are also thinking about how their work in digital transformation and in the programs that they're rolling out, what part that has to play, both in perhaps enabling the organization to reduce its impact and think about its sustainability footprint overall, but also more defensively think about technologies apart, because ultimately technology isn't free when it comes to the side effects and undesirable consequences of digital transformation. So yeah, I mean, it's all over the charts, if I'm honest. So I look forward to sort of getting in some specifics as we go through this chat.
Fantastic. And Celine, what do you see?
Yeah, echoing what Oliver said, I think that things run the gamut. You know, I see a lot of companies doing a lot of really strategic thinking around their sustainability programs and leveraging digital transformation efforts. But I run with a pretty cool crowd of ESG leaders who make these kinds of strategic choices. But I think that we also see a lot of companies struggle with how to integrate sustainability into things like digital transformation. I think there's a lot of legacy thinking where digital transformation is in one part of their mind and ESG is in another, and they don't really bring those together to synergize. And I think that there's ample opportunity now to be able to do that. So yes, runs the gamut, and I think we're up against a lot of challenges for a lot of companies, but also a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely. Well said, both. And when we think about benefits of sustainability to, integrating it into digital transformation efforts, how do you describe those? And of course, we know organizations are all across the spectrum, right? Some are very engaged with sustainability, some, whether industry or, other, political climate, maybe aren't as focused, but what's the benefit of integrating sustainable thinking into digital transformation? Either of you jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in to start with. I think for me, it's getting to a point where this is almost the sort of common sense or best practice, if I can use that sort of phrase. I know that's a bit of a loaded phrase, but if you're doing things right, they should be sustainable. But that's not naturally necessarily how we design, our businesses or our systems. And so for me, this is about looking for the win-win-win. So where can we, move our organizations to a position where we're more efficient, we're lower cost, we're more ethical, but we're also more, lower impact on the environment. And in some cases, those things don't always go hand in hand, but in a lot of cases, I'm discovering that they do. So start with the things that are just easy wins, to kind of move your organization in the right direction. And what I'm finding is actually people can start off thinking about this as a silo, this is a separate consideration, it's something we're going to have to really stress over. And then actually, when you work with stakeholders cross-functionally, they start to realize, well, actually, no, this can help with security improvements. This can help with financial reductions. This can help with risk reduction. This can help with staff engagement. Really interesting example, just quickly, is there's been slightly anecdotal, this one, but there's been some sort of research that's done to say if you ask organizations to reduce cost, they get so far with cost reduction initiatives. But if you ask organizations to reduce cost and think about reducing environmental impact, actually you get far greater cost reduction because people are more engaged in looking for the greater good sort of piece. So I think there are a bunch of benefits that often people just don't see because they just see it as this burden that they need to kind of think about.
I love that example, Oliver. That whole idea that that adding sustainability to a cost reduction mix is interesting because I think that we again, this sort of binary, these false binaries that we put ourselves in around, it's either, ethics or efficiencies is just not true. And engaging people around a bit of the why they're doing the work that they're doing, like how to improve solely than focusing on reducing costs. Like nobody has that much fun reducing costs, but doing some good for the environment or for making your employees' lives better and reducing friction and thus having a more sustainable process in your organization, that can get people fired up. And so I really love that. And I love, Wendy, what you led with around the digital transformation beliefs and sustainability in all the ways. Because, it's not like, obviously we have climate impacts all over the place, and so the environment is a huge piece of this, and I know we'll get into that more, but also the very human component around this, like getting people to adopt whatever digital transformations you're anticipating, having trust in those systems. I mean, there's so many benefits to incorporating these things together that go far beyond cost, but also help drive the bottom line and the efficiency. So that I think combating that false binary is going to be really important to future digital transformation success.
Very well stated both, right? This win, 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 and almost, these compounding effects, not at odds, right? Not another thing. I think very well said. So with that as a really good backdrop, let's talk a little bit more tactically, maybe. There's a lot of information out there about sustainability. So I wonder if we can simplify this for transformation leaders. Like, how do we methodically look at an organization and understand where we should be thinking about sustainability? Maybe you could both kind of speak to that a little bit. And are there any practical tools and resources that you would recommend? So, Oliver, maybe we start with you on this one.
Yeah, and I guess I'm a little bit biased because for the last year or just over a year, I've been leading on an open source project called the Tech Carbon Standard or Technology Carbon Standard, and it's designed to try and demystify particularly the technology environmental impacts side of this. And we started with carbon because we needed to start our scope somewhere. The plan is to broaden it out into broader sustainability perspectives as well. But just to start with, it's just designed to try and signpost and use openly available research and science-based methodologies to help technologists or people doing digital transformation work with their sustainability kind of counterparts and say, right, where in the life cycle of a digital project or a digital platform do I need to think about sustainability? And so I encourage people to go and look at the project. Of course I would, but it's got three main sort of parts to it. It's got an upstream part, it's got an operational part, and it's got a downstream part. So a bit like a life cycle assessment for those of you that are aware of the life cycle assessment sort of concept. Because essentially, when we're thinking about digital transformation, you've got to think about what are those upstream, what are those sort of purchases, what are the services you're procuring, what's the impact of those? Often that's, if for those of you know greenhouse gas terminology, that's scope 3, that's your purchase sort of emissions. Then operationally, if you're running your own technology still on premise, or if you're buying technology services, those operational emissions. And that's often where a lot of people focus. And I get a bit frustrated because the tech world, the big tech companies, just talk about this operational piece, right? Move your compute, your digital technologies to cloud. We're going to run those on renewable energy for you, and you're done. It's a green. Right, the reality is that's only one part of the picture. And so, yeah, that's section 2 is operational. And then the third piece is downstream. So it's almost like, what are the impacts of your digital service or product on consumers, of the kind of users of your platforms? More important for those who have got big consumer websites or e-commerce platforms where they have billions or millions of users. But it's equally something to think about. And actually using these 3 buckets really helps, I think, digital transformation teams think about where the impact is. And as a practical example, just quickly, when I work with clients, a lot of them, because of the narrative around tech, is that it's just about operational. It's about the energy your equipment uses. They thought that's where they needed to optimize. But actually, when we looked at the bigger picture, we discovered that 45% of their emissions were from the laptops and the devices that they were buying each year. So actually, when you kind of zoom out and think actually bigger picture, what do we need to optimize and what do we need to think about? That's been quite eye-opening for a number of people that I've been working with.
That's so neat. And the zooming out piece, zooming in and zooming out on these things is just such a critical endeavor. I might even add, upstream in your construct of upstream, operational, downstream, thinking tactically about it. It can be very strategic and big picture, but tactically, how do you embed ESG considerations in your governance that drives these choices for digital transformation in the first place? I think is a really smart place to start. I think that bringing in your sustainability teams to think through, what ecosystem impacts might be from whatever digital endeavor you're trying to do is a really cool thing. Later on the downstream side, ESG professionals are awesome at stakeholder engagement. Absolutely awesome. And so incorporating that into your CX metrics and how you're looking at how things land on customers, I think that expertise is a really tactical and valuable place to put that in. And then outside of this life cycle approach, which of course I love so much, I think that that data initiatives is a really important place to start with ESG, mounting reporting requirements. ESG leaders so often struggle with data silos and those things. So I think that as companies, in my view, companies are really starting to get their arms around needing a solid data strategy if they're ever going to take advantage of, this thing that, of course, we will talk about, AI. I think that if you look at that data strategy and incorporate ESG components and reporting obligations so that you can improve your compliance, I think that is another really, really neat place to bring digital transformation and sustainability together.
Brilliant, holistic, embedded, absolutely. And maybe a follow-up question for you. If an organization has a business architecture, right? A business architecture being a high-level business view that shows the entire organization and the ecosystem in which it operates. Any thoughts on how that can help with digital transformation, sustainability, kind of deciding what we do? Just any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on this one. I think I talked earlier about the upstream, operational, and downstream. One of the things I think we're not always doing is looking at what's the as-is state. So what does my perhaps less digital, my analog sort of process look like? And there's been some really interesting UK government examples recently of, if I have to do a process and that currently involves people traveling to, a place to kind of fill out a form or something like that, kind of taking that into account, the sort of bigger picture of what you're transforming. So I think that the business architecture concepts are great for that, because you can look at the capabilities, you can look at the business processes, you can look at that sort of organizational sort of side of things and go, right, what have we got today? How does this look like at the moment? And what would that look like if we make some of that a digital journey, or we move all of it, or whatever have you? And I think the business architecture piece for me is where you should start, because there is a danger, and I'm a massive technologist, as Wendy and the rest of the panel know. There is a danger that we just get a little bit too excited about making everything digital. It's like, well, hang on, what parts of this would make most sense to do from a customer or stakeholder perspective? But also, if we're going to think about sustainability, are we going to start with like the paper-based processes or the things that are involving the most travel? How do we digitize those? Because that's going to have the biggest sort of impact. So yeah, I think it's a useful lens, the business architecture toolkit, for sure.
I struggle to see how companies would even endeavor to do these things without a business architecture at this point. You have this, and hi, Hans, I promise I'll stop yammering in a second. You have this fundamental tension that we face in any sort of transformation. You need stability, and then you have this need for change. And how do you balance the two, and how do you connect the two? And to me, business architecture is really the way that that you can provide a stable context for your organization against which to change. So I think that there's an imperative for companies to have a business architecture and to leverage that process in digital transformation. And I think maybe we could even improve the metrics of digital transformation failures if we were to do so.
Love that. And I saw a comment up there from Robert as well, making the great point of, we can tie organizational strategy and UN SDGs to capabilities to really drive where we want to make those improvements and do so methodically. Right on. So Hans, welcome to you. I introduced you earlier and let everybody know you would be coming. So what are your thoughts on, how can we simplify this for transformation leaders? How do you look at an organization and understand where does sustainability apply? And do you have any practical tools or resources that you would recommend?
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry for being a little bit late to this wonderful digital dialogue. I am a fellow of the Institute here of the Digital Transformation, and we did a research a few years ago. And what was interesting was that we could actually find a correlation between maturity in ESG and business benefits. So we saw that when companies are going into a more structured approach, they are actually having a positive business benefit of doing that, uh, in response to actually only doing some awareness about what ESG means, or have just following regulations. But what actually drove the most business benefits was actually to have ESG as part of the corporate culture, part of the DNA of the company itself. And I think that was very, very interesting finding that it's not only about um, having ESG or sustainability as part of the different business component, but it needs to be part of the whole culture, the whole leadership. Everything they need to breathe ESG in that sense, and it needs to influence everything they do, and especially the ecosystem as well. So I think that's something that many leaders have to think about. It's not only about talking about ESG, it's about living it daily in everything they do, from traveling to meetings to everything needs to be influenced by ESG.
And I think that is an excellent point, Hans. Oliver, Selena, I wonder if you have any thoughts as well on how do you embed, as Hans said, ESG or sustainable thinking into the culture and the DNA? Selena, you talked a little bit about governance, but any other thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think that it's essential. I think it's really important to have it at all levels of decision making. So, I think people tend to think of governance as like a compliance responsibility or like an approval process, but really what governance is like decision making at scale. So to be able to embed those considerations when companies are trying to weigh trade-offs as to whether to make a particular strategic initiative or digital transformation, I think having those that decision making structure and decision modeling built into your governance processes is a really good way to do it. I think that multidisciplinary teaming is really important. We have not cracked the nut on silos in organizations yet. They happen everywhere, and so just reaching across the aisle to be able to do that, I think is critical. The concept of like data mesh, and I won't go into it too much, but a concept of having like a federated data governance model, I think is a really good way to embed sustainability considerations into those governance models, so that you are presenting ESG data at different points in decision processes. So I think there's a lot of ways to do it. I think it depends on the context of the organization and, like what industry you're in and these types of things as to like the really tactical pieces. But there's definitely a lot of inflection points in organizations where I think that we could do a better job integrating it into the very fabric.
Excellent. Well, maybe sort of a sweeping question for you all, and then we'll go to any other questions and thoughts from the audience. AI. Again, take this wherever you will, but this intersection of digital transformation, AI, sustainability, just any thoughts, and anyone feel free to jump in.
I have a lot of thoughts on this one. And so I can kind of, for the details, I can kind of push people towards a piece that I wrote last year on, is implosion around AI inevitable, and can it become more sustainable? Because I think one of the things that we have not touched on yet is the sort of long-term versus short-term thinking. I think the danger with technology and digital transformation is it can be very hype-driven. And I think we are certainly riding a wave at the moment. Now, we've been through various sort of AI winters and sort of, misaligned sort of expectations before, right? But I think we're going through the latest one. I'm not completely dismissing this wave. There is absolutely value, and I've seen that with the projects I've been working on. But there's also an awful lot of rushing in and brute forcing, I would say, the problems. Like, the thing we all need to remember is that the human brain is incredibly efficient. Like, our human brains are on like 30-40 watts of energy. It's amazing that we have all this amazing processing power in our brains, and yet we're trying to recreate stuff that's not even getting towards human level reasoning, and it's using crazy kilowatts of power. It's orders and orders of magnitude more power. And so unfortunately, the implication of this sort of rush towards AI enabling almost everything is that it's reversing people's net zero commitments, right? You've got the big tech companies kind of starting to have to sort of backpedal a little bit on some of the commitments they were making around net zero. And so it's a big challenge. Now, like I say, I'm not completely dismissing it. I think there is value there, but I think as digital transformation leaders and practitioners, I think the responsibility needs to shift towards everyone working in this space to have an obligation to challenge. Is this actually really of value? Is this? And when I say this, I mean like long term, medium to longer term. Like, yeah, sure that we might get some newspaper headlines or something, some press attention by launching this product. Maybe our shareholders will give us a boost in value short term, but actually longer term, is this really the right direction for us? And what things are we going to prioritize? So I think it really requires, kind of questioning the value versus the hype. For sure, there's going to be some amazing applications of it and use cases of it, but I am concerned that we're currently using still quite immature products that are brute forcing the solution, and that comes with consequences that we all need to be comfortable we're going into conscientiously rather than just accidentally.
Hans, Selena, other thoughts?
Yeah, I can go. When we did a study a couple of years ago, we studied high-performing versus low-performing companies and see how they actually address sustainability. And one thing that was the key, there were 4 key differentiators between high and low performance. One was that they developed new sustainable products and services. They reduced travel. They also funded ESG causes locally in the community. But maybe the biggest differentiator was sustainable investments. So when they started to calculate or to drive the investment decisions, they always had a sustainability factor that they looked on in that investment proposal. And that comes to, I think, with AI as well. If we want to combine AI, sustainability, and digital transformation, I think that we need to include sustainability as one of the factors in those investment proposals and decisions itself, because I think that is going to be very, very important going forward. Also related to the importance of the brand being very much sustainability friendly. So not only looking at the return on investment, but also including the sustainability in that decision as well.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. And when I talk about AI, a lot of time I like to talk about it as a double-edged sword, because you have this, it is a powerful technology no matter how you slice it. And I agree about the hype and, wanting to say to shareholders, let's rub some AI on it and increase our investment. I think that causes all sorts of problems. But the energy dilemma is obviously a huge piece of it. You have AI that sucks down energy, and then you also can use AI to really advance energy efficiency efforts. It's a really cool way for companies to take their energy costs down and to do better in those areas too. There's, in the renewable energy sector, there's a ton of opportunity with AI in terms of, how companies are purchasing power and creating some more sustainability in like power transactions and those things. But that double-edged sword is also everything else too. So it increases the complexity of your digital transformation, and it also can help you get your arms around complexity and help our very powerful human brains digest complexity as we fire into our co-pilot and get better context for the decisions we're making or whatever it happens to be. So I think that those balancing of trade-offs where you have something that is both a problem and a solution is something that our typical way of approaching things, governance decisions, decisions, transformation decisions, technology selection. It's not really something that we've been built for so far. So I think that companies really need to take a step back and say, how are we going to deal with something that is like a different kind of complexity than we've been navigating, get our arms around it, and enable teams and people to empower them to be able to adjust to those realities and balance those trade-offs. I think that's going to be a real trick. And that means as IT practitioners, we really need to lean into the human side of things quite a bit. And so I'm looking forward to that being part of the digital transformation as well.
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think Selina's touched on a really good point around the double-edged sword piece. And I think the other thing we're seeing a lot of is everyone's imagination's been captured by generative AI. And so a lot of what I was referring to was generative AI, because that's kind of the currently sort of hyped topic. But Selina's point is that there's traditional machine learning, there's other AI approaches that are far more efficient and actually do help optimize energy grids and other great things. So yeah, it's finding that balance, using generative AI as the thing that's got the board's attention, but then making sure that that's not the only sort of AI that's discussed or considered. I think that's going to be part of the challenge here as well, is that it's maybe move people away from generative AI as being the answer to everything, because it's what they've seen be talked about so much, and they've perhaps seen it firsthand. It's so accessible, isn't it, as a technology, and going, yeah, that's great. That's maybe something we can sort of prototype some ideas on, but actually, there are a broader range of AI and data science opportunities out there that we can apply to the organization. So, yeah, I think it's about the right tool for the right job. And I'm really hopeful that over the next sort of year or two, we're going to see far more sustainable, lighter weight, lower impact AI products and services come onto the market. I think they have to, because quite frankly, they're not financially sustainable in a lot of cases. We're not really seeing the true cost of a lot of these services right now, because if we were, no one would be able to afford to use them at scale. So it's going to be really interesting to see how we sort of balance this sustainability challenge that AI has at the moment.
Yeah, I really appreciate your well-reasoned and nuanced perspectives around all this. So that was a big question. Well, I think it's a great time for bringing up some questions. We have one here from John Erickson, so I'll let anyone answer this one. How do you define what sustainability friendly really means? And as John says, companies should be doing the right things for the right reasons versus pressures from the outside. So anyone want to answer John? Selina, go for it.
Yeah, well, I'll take this one. We have some unique pressures from the outside here in the U.S. currently. So I think it's a really important question, John. And I would say that we don't have a ton of time to really delve into it. I would point you to Higher Ground, Allison Taylor's book. She presents a very pragmatic view of like, okay, what is your company in the business of? What are the things that you impact the most? Start there. Focus there. Don't, companies have a tendency to do a bunch of like PR friendly, sprinkle some ESG love around for PR purposes that don't really make sustainable impact, paradoxically. And so if you can focus on what the company impact is, something that aligns to your strategy, that aligns to your branding, and focus there, I think that is the most important. Consumer pressure and outside pressure will always continue to fluctuate, and it's something that we should be mindful of. But that like knee-jerk reaction that we've seen in businesses sort of responding to any sort of pressure goes out there, it can distract you from your mission. It can just take you so far off course, and that lessens your sustainability impact overall. So I think being really methodical and choosing the places where companies can best leverage their operations and their footprint and to benefit the people whom they impact the most is where things should be prioritized. So that's my 2 cents. I know everybody probably has thoughts on this.
Love it.
Yeah,
Huh? Yeah.
Jump in there as well. I've been working in the construction with construction companies here in Sweden, which is really, really interesting. They had such a little bit of a recession here due to high inflations and so on. But what they told me once was that it's really difficult to sell a house or an apartment today that is not sustainability friendly. because it's such a lifestyle choice about what you want to do and how you want to be perceived in some way. So it's very difficult to sell it. So everything in the construction company is about ESG, is about eliminating or reducing the carbon footprint of what they do in every single process, everything component, everything is about sustainability. At the same time, they have problem of getting customers to buy or to technology in their apartments or houses, which is quite interesting. So they try to sell all these fancy technology gadgets to the houses, and no one was really interested to buy it. So there's I don't know what to draw for conclusion here, but the sustainability is such an important driver nowadays of especially in the construction industry.
Right on. Let's take our next question. So Oliver, I think this one's for you. I'll let you have a look and respond.
Thank you. Yeah. So similar three scope approach could be used broaden. Yeah, I absolutely think so. I mean, when we designed the Tech Carbon Standard, we were looking at other broader sustainability approaches like life cycle assessments, as I say. So what the intention with it was to kind of demystify, because the problem you had is you have a bit like the question just now, like my company wants to be more sustainable. Where should it start, and what does it do? What does it align with? But to start with, you need to kind of break the organization down. And for the Tech Carbon Standard, it was, what's the technology, digital landscape look like for your organization? And so I think it's about kind of coming up with that common ground approach. So yeah, you'll see references to sort of previous sort of sustainability work in there, but also kind of from a digital transformation sort of angle, what are the areas of a technology project that we should be thinking about? I think scope 3 is also a really challenging thing, right? And I touched on it earlier, your purchased emissions. So what are your suppliers doing about sustainability and carbon and energy and so on? And this is an area I'm expecting to see significant progress. Europe is pushing through some really interesting legislation. Some stuff's already come out, which is going to mean that large data centers have to start reporting sort of energy data and various things like that. So I think the challenge we often have at the moment is we just lack the data to really make the right decision, particularly in the supply chain and the scope 3 sort of space. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see some improvements in that regard. But yeah, I mean, look, open to people collaborating on this. It's an open source project. So if you want to get involved, then please do get in touch.
Outstanding. Excellent. Other questions, thoughts? We'll take a look if there are any other comments. And we certainly welcome questions as well.
This is a great one.
Anyone like to answer Ralph's question?
Yeah, I can start with this one. I think the most important when you are in that situation is actually ask yourself, why digital transformation? What is the purpose of doing this? And really start understanding that digital transformation is not only digitalizing processes and so on. It's something that will influence the whole company, the whole business architecture, everything you do. And it's good to have some sort of framework of where to start and how. And the Institute of Digital Transformation provides this in a really excellent way. The second point is that digital transformation is not only about technology. It's very much about people. It's about leadership and culture. You need to address those points as well. It's not about delegating to someone to do digital transformation. It needs to come from the top. It needs to come from the CEO, from the CTO, CIO, the board. Everybody needs to be fully committed to this. And it's going to be a bumpy road, a bumpy journey. So it needs to be very, have a lot of patience with that and manage the different aspects of that journey.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, Hans. About the people thing to me strikes me as always the critical factor in a digital transformation. I think that we need to engage the employee base in digital transformation efforts, really understand the why. I often have found that the communication strategy around digital transformation efforts is lacking. And that I think is a really important component. I think that engaging people who can be stewards in different departments in the organization is really important. I would suggest at this particular time in life, since AI is the hype thing of the world, that is actually kind of a neat way in. If you can, you know, say to your company, like, this is something for all of us. We're not trying to reduce headcount through this. We're trying to, you know, achieve X, Y, Z objectives. And we're trying to look at like our vast toolbox of technological solutions, AI being a tool, not the solution. It's a tool to get there, and start to really engage people and make it cool to engage them. I think that it can be just such a differentiating factor between those transformations that fail and those that sit and churn and churn and churn. So that would be one suggestion.
And I think the point about, you know, kind of we're in our second or third attempt, and then someone's follow-up point, which is, well, you're viewing it wrong, you know, this is an ongoing thing, is a really fascinating. And then the cultural clash, isn't it? Is, I think there's a mindset of, you know, we do projects, there's a thing we need to respond to, and we're done. And I think, yeah, there are initiatives like that at times, but I think in most cases the culture that you should be leaving behind is this continual improvement, continual feedback loop, and this culture of being open to sort of improvement, and not, you know, completely rewriting everything every 2 weeks or anything like that, but having this sort of mindset and this curiosity about how could we do this better and how do we constantly sort of improve. Because I think the world has moved from these sort of static waterfall projects where, yeah, you make a shift to online, or you make a shift to mobile, or you make a shift to AI, and you're done. You're going to have to constantly, you know, look and horizon scan. What's the next thing that we need to, as an organization, respond to? And how do we have a sustainable architecture and sort of business platform and, you know, approach that allows us to continue to respond in a sustainable way? Because I think a sustainable business is one that can respond to sort of challenges and setbacks, and then, you know, kind of evolve as an organization. I think the definition of a non-sustainable organization is one that is stuck in the past, is using a very linear, extractive kind of economy type approach, and those organizations are going to die. You know, they may not happen overnight, but they are going to go away as, you know, finite linear resource streams dry up. You know, the raw materials just aren't going to be there. The kind of non-renewable energy approaches just aren't going to be sustainable by definition. So I think the culture is bang on. It's how do you not just transform your digital sort of platforms, how do you transform the mindset to being like a more evergreen sort of adaptable approach, I think is going to be key.
Brilliant.
And aligning incentives to that, I think, is really important. That continuous improvement situation, like that culture in and of itself can drive so much beneficial change. And I've seen it repeatedly in companies when employees can get involved in, like, how can I do my job better? How could I help our department function better? What can we do? That can just reap monumental culture shifts. And I think that, to Ralph's second question, that is a cultural component that differentiates those companies that are good at sustainability and, you know, also good at operations.
Yeah,
I love it. Awesome.
Oh, but I would just to say another very short comment as well to that, is that many companies going into digital transformation see this as a short product. You do it 2 years and then you're done. And I think this is not the case. This is an ongoing journey, or never-ending journey that will take a very, very long time. And it needs to evolve continuously and go through different phases of new technology and so on, but not hurry it up too fast to get to a certain point where you're saying, yeah, I'm done. I was talking to a CEO the other day, and we talked about AI, and he said that this is not something that will solve our problems tomorrow. This is a 10-year journey. And I think that is so important, that to see the longer play in this. It's not something that we do and then we're done. It's something that will continue endlessly.
Very well said. So brilliant conversation. We'll start to wrap up a little bit here. I have one more question for you, and then I'll just leave some space for closing comments, anything that maybe we haven't talked about. But your last practical advice for transformation leaders, what can they take away right now to put these ideas into action? And Selena, maybe we start with you.
Yeah, I actually, I might tee off of, I think it was Ralph's last comment, that executives they view AI as a technology responsibility. Yes, thank you, John. Robert, thank you, Robert, for the question. I think that this is like a very practical place to start, because I think that people, especially who have been in a company for a long time, who are more senior in their careers, who are, in a place where they've arrived and have a zillion other, irons in the fire that they have to deal with. I think that finding ways to educate them on the scope of what AI means. I mean, AI is in every single place in your company, from HR to IT to compliance to legal, every place. So to be able to bring, different stakeholders together from different parts of your company and kind of educate, in way, I probably wouldn't call it like executive education, but to take the opportunity to educate about just how big the scope of this can be for an organization is a very good way to start. So of course I would, advocate for including your sustainability leaders. I would advocate for including your legal and compliance leaders, because those organizations are going to have to change their service models and these kinds of things. And HR especially, like working up against AI adoption and what that means. Like, you can't have AI without the humans. And so that partnership needs to be very, very clear. And IT, I think, if you're in an organization where your executives think that IT is the ones who should be leading the charge, I think being very explicit that this is a socio-technical sort of dynamic that we're dealing with here. We need all the people, all the minds to help us figure out how to navigate this complexity with integrity.
Yes, love it. Hans, practical next steps.
Yes. I think we said many good things here tonight, so I don't know what I could add. But I think if I would meet a executive or a board member or a CEO somewhere and talk digital transformation and so on, I would really advise them to learn what digital transformation actually means, because it's not only about implementing new technology. There's so much more if you want to get the true business benefits out of it. And looking at different aspects of digital transformation, for example, human perspective, cultural perspective as well. And to that effect, we have in the Institute developed a manifesto for digital transformation, which is an excellent starting point for having that kind of discussion. And we also developed a tool for assessing digital transformation health within companies as well, which is an excellent starting point as well. But starting with the manifesto, what are the key components of digital transformation, and how does it relate to business architecture and sustainability and AI and so on? It's a really good starting point.
Brilliant, Hans. And that's why the Institute exists, to help people
Yes.
on this journey. So great call out. Love it. Oliver, practical next steps.
Yeah, I love what both Selena and Hans have said. And I guess to add to that, it would be start with like the offense versus defense question. And I think we've touched on this a little bit during this conversation, which is, for my organization's biggest sustainability challenge, is that inherent in the industry that we play in? So are we a big, industrial manufacturing, a big power hungry or materials hungry organization? In which case you probably need to be thinking about how digital can transform the sustainability of your organization overall, because that's probably where your biggest footprints are. But actually, if it turns out you're more of a knowledge economy business, you're perhaps more in the financial services sector, or you're a services company, you're more on the knowledge economy sort of side of things, then actually probably tackling digital emissions and sustainability of digital platforms is priority number one. So I think that would be my first thing, is to identify where you have those two buckets, or maybe there's a blend where you straddle those two spaces. And then, I echo the other points really about sort of timeframes. So I think for me, this is always a good opportunity to go, can we please just counterbalance from the current, magpie shiny thing projects that we're trying to implement in the short term, and think about the medium to longer term? Where's this going to lead us? If all of our competitors are also implementing this technology, what's our differentiator and our relevance going to be in 3 to 5 years? And we need to start thinking about that now, because otherwise we'll be blindsided by it when it hits us in the face in 3 years, because we've constantly been on this short-termist kind of strategy. So I think it's an opportunity, I think, sustainability to go, look, sustainability is all about that long-term, longevity of the organization and relevance of the organization. Let's make sure we aren't just getting too caught up in today's sort of hype, and what are we doing to plan for a sustainable future?
Yes. So we'll just end with any closing comments you all have, any last words of wisdom or inspiration. Hans, how about you? Closing comments?
I think when we talk about sustainability and digital transformation, it's a little bit more complex than people relatively think about it, and it has more perspectives than maybe an executive would think about it. So it's important really to learn what this is all about and understand from experience how to do this. So, but it can be done, and the business upside and business benefits are enormous if you do it in the right way. So not to lose the tempo, but get a little bit perspective to it, and that's why we're here at the Institute.
That's right.
I love.
Oh, go ahead, Selena, please.
No, I was just going to react to the last question as part of my closing comments. Digital transformation. I do feel like transformation ends up like nobody wants to do transformation. It's like painful. It's, it causes organizational drag and all of these things. So I've been trying to talk about it, Robert, a lot more as like digital health and operational effectiveness, and depending on the audience and of who you're talking to, like transformation does not have to. It doesn't mean you're like blowing everything up. It might be a very slow, methodical approach that you take over time to build towards a more cohesive vision. So I really like the question, and I admire that a lot. Kind of as a piece of that for my closing comments, I think that with the pace of change in technology and with the AI hype or transformational abilities of generative AI to help us solve a lot of company problems, I think that we have a really good opportunity to build trust within organizations. We see like our social fabric fraying, where people and employees are unhappy, they're distrustful of business and governments and these kinds of things. And so I think that if you very explicitly include the objective of trying to build trust throughout any trust and ethics, you're going to meet your regulatory requirements, because if you ground in ethics, the regulatory obligations actually follow quite nicely, and you're also going to be building a healthier ecosystem amongst your suppliers and your employees and the customers you serve. So I think that should be an explicit priority of everyone.
And Oliver, last closing comments.
Yeah, I mean, I love what Selena was saying there about using ethics as the sort of counterbalance, really, for are you doing the right thing? Look, this is a topic I could go on and on about, so it's hard to sort of wrap up with a closing comment. But I think, I would say there are a number of open source projects out there now for different parts of this. So don't feel like this is something you have to solve on your own. I think that a lot of the challenge I see people facing in our world is they don't feel they have enough awareness or understanding of these topics. So, so I would start with awareness and education, work out whether what you're looking at is the right thing, because I think there's a danger that you're blinded by the marketing and the greenwashing. I think Selena touched on greenwashing. It's a point we didn't really sort of talk much about, but I think trying to educate yourself to guard away from the greenwashing so that you can focus on the things that will really actually move the needle for your organization's future.
That's right. Thank you all so much. We could talk for the next hours ahead, but thank you for an absolutely incredible conversation, for sharing your insights and wisdom with all of us. Thanks to everyone who joined us and for all of your great comments and questions. And we wish you all the best and see you on the next Digital Dialogue. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on most Tuesdays of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.